Here, this is a large 60 by 48 painting. This is a close-up of it, and I have a background that is really nebulous. There's not much there other than color and value and texture versus something that has some texture but less texture than this back here. And then there's other elements that have even less texture yet, and then some texture as they go back and blurred edges and so forth. So let's take a look at the whole painting. So painting, I did a smaller one, I think a 14 by 18 of this subject matter. This is just a small little vase. The vase is probably maybe 10 inches tall, but now this vase is pretty large in this 60 by 40. But here it was exploring textures and an application of paint and helping to contrast the eucalyptus leaves and the glass vase they're in against something else. And I didn't want to put other things back here. This vase was sitting in front of an oriental carpet. And the smaller painting that I did first, I put a somewhat subtle design of the oriental carpet in it. But when I got to this big one, I started to put that in. And for the big painting, it just wasn't working. And I started to just get rid of it, get a palette knife out and start to lose it. And I liked the spontaneity of and the contrast of that texture in the background. And that helped to set out, that immediately, of course, along with the color, it immediately set off the kind of silver dollar petals of the eucalyptus plant. It's kind of a fun project that I did of some magpies. If you've ever been out in the West, the magpies they're always very curious, and they come around in groups, and sometimes they can just be a menace. And I call this one Trouble times 4. And they're obviously all clinging to this older, dried up sunflower plant, and with the sunflower heads, and various birds eat the seeds. I'm not sure. I didn't even look into it to see if magpies eat the seeds. They probably do. But I wanted the birds to be a soft look to them because of their feathers, and feathers are very soft. And even because of that, I had the background somewhat texturally painted with kind of dabbing the paint down and making a transition from warm to this green, grayed color to a little bit more of a blue-green down here. Then I ended up, then of course the plant itself has a lot of texture to it, so that smoothness of everything else allowed the plants to be more textural. I splattered paint. You can see how I splattered stuff. That gives a texture and just, I don't know, there's a looseness to it. All that splattering, of course, doesn't happen on the birds itself, but it happens on other elements of the scene. And it just kind of loosens things up. And I love this little area. Let me go right over. I love this area right in here, where you have these kind of transitions that you come in from splattering, you have it in with this gnarly old stem that kind of is, you could just snap, when it get dry, they can just snap these things off. All the leaves get dry. Certain plants, they are beautiful when they're just starting to grow, when they become the time in their life when they're harvesting, or when, let's say in this case, when the sunflowers are yellow and beautiful, and then when they start to dry up, the whole plant dries up, it takes on a whole nother character. And sometimes that character is defined through texture. So I try to review my subjects and let the subject depict what I want to do with it and how it contrasts everything else. Obviously snow, I talked about snow earlier with that, comparing a gravel road to a snowy road. This doesn't have a lot of texture other than the trees and some of the leaves that are left, and occasionally on some of the oak tree, red oaks, and so forth. But there's a little bit of texture here. I like some of these areas where you get some dragging across the surface with a not really a wet brush, but a little bit more of a dry, soft brush, so that it's not dispersing the paint that's on it. It's not dispersing and mixing so much with the paint below it. It just kind of comes off and allows to drag and leaves this wonderful surface. Very different than this. You can even see there's texture here, but not as much because there's no value shifting there. The only texture you'll see here is when the light hits it, you'll see the thicker paint used, and I'll try to sometimes sculpt my winter scenes a little bit with paint, or almost like a frosting on a cake. Let me get that back to the regular view. So I'm trying to show a variety of paintings where I definitely take advantage and use and think about texture. This one was the lead-in title painting, and this was a study I did locally here. In the early fall, it was late summer, early fall, trees were just starting to turn some colors, and some still had green. A lot of these trees had vines on them, a type of vine that doesn't get brown. It stays green, and then the other parts of the tree get more of their brownish and yellow-brown and yellow ochre leaves. And so this was kind of fun, just painting the variety of textures that I could. And a lot of times my on-location scenes can get really textural because it's wet on wet. For me to put this loaded up white with a little bit of blue over top of this passage without it contaminating and blending into it, I had to put a lot of paint on a brush and almost let the brush almost deliver the paint without it really pushing in and starting to mix into this layer. It's just dabbed on, and you get a little bit more texture. And it's interesting to explore that kind of brushwork and the end result of the texture that that is remaining. Whoops! Oh my gosh! What did I do here? Oh no, I'm okay. I thought I just stopped my video. Let's see, let's get that on the screen again. Here's a painting that is very almost ethereal. It's a high key painting, meaning that your lightest light and your darkest dark are relatively close. So the darkest dark is maybe a number 5 value. The latest light's almost a number 2, so it's a very high key painting. But there isn't a lot of texture in the trees or the water. I left the texture more in some of the areas where there's maybe rippling water and some of the reflections, and that's where I left more of the texture to be. Otherwise, it's very soft. So texture can come into play very thick, like that last painting of the trees, or sometimes very minimal. Fun to just explore. What I would suggest to do is take a larger canvas, and explore with a lot of variety of paint marks and thick and thin and tools that you use. I use all kinds of tools from the purchased palette knives to something from the hardware store to sometimes something out of the kitchen drawer that seems to work. Scrub brushes that leave an interesting texture. You don't have to use all the tools that you buy in an art store. Be creative. Have fun with what you can get used to develop different types of texture. There's a texture in here, but very minimal compared to the the soil that was dug up. What is this? Was an Amish farmer. On the other side of the hill here, this is kind of looking, and on the other side of the hill, he's got a team of mules here. There's actually two sets. I think there's, what do we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 6 here, and I think there were 6 in back. There was 12 mules altogether. They were pulling a big disc, and he was disking up this field. And this is what he was making the next pass and stopped, and I just caught him at this. I took a photograph, put it in. I changed the whole scene, put it into this interesting dynamic angles and so forth, and I had him more or less just surveying, stopping and resting, and surveying the land in front of him. And the Amish are very proud people to farm the land and use very minimal type of services like the rest of us are so used to using. And they, anyways, it's interesting to see how they can still make do. But here, texture sometimes is also painted, painted texture to make it look like there's texture in different shapes, along with just how the paint is maybe applied, like here, how the paint is applied to make it look textural. So we can paint texture, or sometimes we can apply texture. Look how smooth this is compared to maybe a little bit like that, or like this one here, or like this here, or like that, or something like this. Sometimes there's little broken edges with the tooth of the canvas, or and there's sometimes that I will also use different types of gessos that I made, gesso a canvas and gesso with a lot of texture, so that when I'm painting, it'll have some really opportunity to define a lot of texture within the subject matter. Here this is a winter scene with pheasants foraging in the wintertime. So the texture is very minimal here. The birds have their soft feathers, different patterns, 3 male birds and 1 female hen here, and 3 roosters. And then the texture is more in some of the old berry bushes and little leaves, but it's contrasted by the soft, hardly non-textural snow banks. And then you get up into the sky, again clean against more textural little elements without having to paint them all, but just leaving little dabs and marks with one's different tools. Here's some close-up of a painting that I had started and did a whole series. I took some pictures, but there's some palette knife used here. Brushwork here, brushwork with some softening, and then palette knife for some big rocks that were here. So you can see the texture that's already being explored. And it becomes fun when you start to apply the paint and learn to get effects like this, where this is some water that's coming down between some rocks and you're getting this splash and this shadowed underside a little bit more lit up on top. And it becomes much more fun. It'd be, I guess, no different than a writer that really doesn't know the vocabulary and is trying to write and describe something. And then when he or she really becomes educated and learns all the wonderful adjectives and verbs and different ways that he or she can define a scene through words, it's no different than the artist exploring and finding out the definitions that we can explore to make a certain passage. This is brushwork, 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 palette knife, brushwork. That probably was a palette knife, brushwork, maybe palette knife later. But explore that. But first of all, maybe just do it on a canvas where you're just getting some different marks make a bunch of marks and see all the marks you can make. And of course, keep in mind contrasting. Something smooth against something more textural. Something dabbled and broken, and something much more as a mass. Texture can be used. I'll use that even a texture in a figurative or portrait. This is a portrait of a Yamasee Native American. The Yamasee tribe existed down in the Charleston area, and they were a very handsome tribe, and there was a mix between Native American and African American, and that's why they had kind of the traits of both in their facial looks and structure and coloration. But what I liked is instead of having to paint kind of the buckskin on this Native American, I gave the suggestion of it and just gave some marks that become more abstract and letting more finished marks become more revealing the portrait of the Native American. So I'll make this a little bit larger. This was done on a gessoed panel. You can see the gesso background. You can get smooth paint on a gessoed background, and you can get a little bit more textural paint that actually start. You see, I'm almost sculpting the face with the marks that I'm leaving. Some more textural, some less. You get down here where I put this down, I think, with a palette knife and let that skip across. I got some of my palette knives are pretty old, and like a nice clean palette knife would have a nice, if you looked at the edge of it, would be like that. My palette knives look kind of like this, you know. So they leave an unusual mark. If I want a real clean mark, I have to get a little bit of a newer palette knife, and that'll leave a real nice, clean, smooth application. We got a few more here. This was a relatively, I think this might be a 12 by 9 painting. It's not really a large painting, but it's an ethereal painting. It's a more of a daydream or night dream, if you will. It is a painting depicting the 23rd Psalm from the Bible. If those of you that know the Bible, It talks about walking through the valley in the shadow of death and finding peace at some point in trusting in the Lord and so forth. Again, I'm not here to be preaching Christianity, but what I wanted out of this painting was I wanted some texture. There's some texture in the mountain here. And I'm going to make this smaller so you can see what actually the whole painting looks like. It's in a tabernacle frame. And that's the whole painting. But I wanted this to be more or less a soft, ethereal, visionary painting. And I didn't want to have a lot of thick paint because sometimes our dreams aren't really defined in texture. They're much more subtle and almost like vapors, if you will. Vapors of thoughts and ideas, and so I wanted a little bit more of that translucency to the feel of the whole painting. So you can sometimes use texture very minimally, and then a little bit of texture you put on will stand out from the other areas that have hardly no texture. So here's one again where there's a lot of texture. This was a fall scene. It was a location that was a road back here that I used to walk into town on a daily walk, and there's this little stream down here that this was right on the skirts of a little town, New Hope, and there was all houses all around here. Some houses up this way, over this way, and this one area here. If you got in there and you got in a certain spot and didn't look for the houses, you felt like you were in the wilds. And I called it the creek is called Aquatong Creek, and I just call it the wilds of Aquatong Creek. And because it does kind of have that sense of being wild and untamed and gnarly. Look at the timbers that are down, and I added a little bit more timber than what was in there, and in some of these, so it looks like something out west, or someplace where you get a lot of timbers that fall down from beetle infestation or just winds and storms. And it's a fall scene with the fall leaves and grasses and driedness, and you just had all that good texture. And here's another thing to think about. The frame, this was an older frame that the gallery owner actually came across 2 of these frames at an auction. And the frame has a very nice, smooth softness to the carve. This is all hand carved. It's an older frame, probably made back in maybe 1910, 1920, something like that. Had some beautiful carves to it. It's a 23 karat gold leaf frame. Beautiful frame. Both of them were awesome. And I chose this frame to put on here because I wanted a frame with a nice smoothness, with a little bit of this hand textural. But I wanted that to contrast this, because this needs the contrast of something smooth. I could put you've maybe seen some of the old gnarly barn board or barnwood frames that have a lot of weatheredness to them. I'm sure it would have looked nice on here, but I wanted something to contrast this. I wanted this to be the gnarliness, and this to be the smooth that then transitioned into someone's home. So your walls are more than likely, the walls of a house are usually smooth. They could have some light texture to them, but that's a nice transition from a smooth wall to the frame to now this gnarly fall scene with a lot of texture to it. Let's go to, and then that's the last. So I kind of explained what texture is, and I'm kind of also explaining why we should use it, because there's a contrast that we get, when we should use it. So I'll maybe do one more segment, maybe next month, one more. I'll just finish up on this so that we just have a little bit better idea of what texture and how texture can be used in our paintings. It's to help to describe something. It's helped to make something more exciting than something more subtle and quiet. So take advantage. Explore, though, with your tools and different canvases or papers. Watercolors can use heavier pound papers. Hot press, cold press is very textural versus hot press. And the pastelists will do the same thing. We'll use certain more textural papers versus a smooth paper. And the painter, acrylic or oil painter, can use different types of linen or different types of prepared surfaces, along with all these wonderful tools that just mount up all over the place in the studio, and it becomes a big workshop sometimes. So enjoy and explore textures. Take care for now. Bye.
I've been teaching art workshops for over 20 years. Prompted by many students' requests, I created this particular Study to Studio course. This course is developed for either the indoor or outdoor painter. The translation from a reference study to a larger studio painting has always been a challenging process. In this 4-week course, I define the tools of my trade, my palette, and an important color mixing demonstration. I will take you through the same exact process which has proven to be successful for me in the studio, including various creative options that will improve the results of your studio efforts. My process of teaching is wrapped around the sound and historic foundations and principles that are the guidelines that defines quality art. I feel confident and believe that you will discover this course to be very beneficial to your future artistic development. Tucson Art Academy's online courses is the new way for art educational opportunities. I hope to see and work with you in this new online course.